very much for coming this morning. My name is Jim Lakely. I'm the Director of Communications at the Heartland Institute. The Heartland Institute is a 28-year-old free market think tank based here in Chicago. And our mission for all those 28 years has been to discover, develop, and promote free market solutions to social and economic problems. And we've dealt with a lot in those 28 years, the topics that we're going to be talking about today, which is the property tax levies in Cook County and analysis of those over the last 10 years and in the future. An example of some of the work that we've done over those 28 years is on the mantle over there, including our prospectus. You can learn more about the Heartland Institute and our work on budget and tax issues in general. With that, and to talk about this report, to begin that discussion, I'd like to introduce John Nodorft. He's the Director of Government Relations at the Heartland Institute.
This report, which details the property tax levy increases, which is the total amount of property taxes collected by the 552 taxing districts within Cook County. The Heartland Institute, in our report, did an analysis of all the records obtained from the Cook County's Treasurer's Office by the Freedom of Information Act, and it reveals that property tax collections rose at twice the rate of inflation over the last 10 years. We believe that these current trends in government spending are unsustainable, and that huge tax increases or municipal bankruptcies loom unless structural reforms are made. For instance, the average property tax owner pays 48% more in property taxes today than they did a decade ago, with some homeowners seeing triple-digit increases. The property tax burden will skyrocket in the next decade, despite stagnant or declining home prices, because of the growing public pension and benefit obligations. Some of the key points that we found in our report include that property taxes in total dollars in Cook County increased from $7.89 billion to $11.69 billion. That is twice the rate of inflation. Suburban municipalities increased property taxes by 75%, while taxing agencies within the city of Chicago only increased by 44%, and those by the Cook County government actually remained almost exactly flat. School districts, which collect the largest portion of property taxes, increased property taxes by 58%, while 27 school districts more than doubled their property taxes over the last decade. We have a copy of just a sample property tax bill, which shows that on each property tax bill, each property tax owner is paying between property taxes to 12 to 20 different governments each year. So this is kind of a compounding effect of they're paying to all these property tax districts which are going up. On this side, this actually shows the top 25 largest property tax increases over the last 10 years. Up as high as 3,634% in the city of Countryside, and number 2, 1,188% in the village of Schaumburg. With that, I'm going to turn it over to President of the Heartland Institute, Joe Bass.
Thanks, John. Hi. I think the most important message here is that taxes in Cook County are going up by all these different levels of government, that these increases are not sustainable, and that they're having a very bad impact on the economic development for this area, for the whole county. As you know, last week the Chicagoland Chamber of Commerce released a major report on economic development in Cook County. Just a week before that, Mayor Emanuel released his own study from World Business Chicago. Both of these reports were looking at ways of encouraging economic development in the area, but they remained, as far as I can tell from the reports I've read, silent on one of the most important issues, which is taxes. Illinois and Chicago specifically continue to lose jobs and population to other states that have lower taxes. The increases in taxes at the state level, put through last year, reduces our competitive advantage that we used to have by having a lower income tax rate. Property taxes are very high and rising according to this study. We know that sales taxes are very high and rising in Cook County itself. So unless we fix this, I think Chicago and Illinois generally are going to continue to lose jobs and population to other states. Thank you. And the next speaker is Andy Shaw. Andy.
Justice Brandeis said 100 years ago that sunlight is the best disinfectant, and that is as true today as it was a century ago. You can't assess what you can't see, and you can't see what you don't have access to. So here's the value today. We are seeing data for the first time that demonstrates how high property taxes have risen in Cook County over the past decade. This data will allow us to ask and answer some very important questions. Were these tax increases justified? Was the money spent fairly, transparently, efficiently, honestly, and accountably? That's the first question. The second one is, do we need all of these separate taxing bodies, all of these units of government imposing taxes on regular taxpayers at a time of economic strain for so many people? Or is it time to start eliminating and consolidating units of government in the interest of efficiency? We are a nonpartisan watchdog group, so I'm not going to try to answer those questions today. But I am going to commend the Heartland Institute for doing the research, for Treasurer Pappas providing the data, and now the job is up to the rest of us to make an assessment. Why did the increases go up so much? Were they justified? And do we need all of this government in Cook County? Those are the answers that are going to allow us to impose accountability on the system. So, today we have a wonderful example of transparency. Now it's up to all of us to impose accountability for the benefit of taxpayers.
And Ted Dabrowski from the Illinois Policy Institute, Vice President of Policy.
Thank you. For years we've been warning about rising property taxes and the burden that taxes are having overall on Chicago, Cook County, and Illinois residents across the state. So we think it's a great effort that this team has put together to release this data, make the data more available, more transparent, and help us answer the tough questions that have been raised. What's important about getting Illinois turned around is making sure that we're competitive, that we're helping our residents survive this difficult crisis, and get the state back on the economic path to prosperity. Thank you.
Okay, so I can't go any place, walk any place, get on an elevator, or talk to anyone in this county, and there are 1.7 million people who own parcels of property, without them saying to me, why is it that your tax bill's gone up? Fact of the matter is that this is a process whereby people who do own property need to be educated so that when you get your bill, when you receive this bill, the fact of the matter is you're not paying to Cook County, you're paying to between 14 and 20 different governments on the left-hand side of your bill. Each of these can raise these amounts. So what this study has done is taken the last 10 years for each of these 550 governments and shown the increase. This chart helps you to fully understand how that works. So for example, in the county of Cook, which is 5.5 million people, there are 29 fire districts, 122 municipalities, 49 libraries, and so on. This tells you what the total was that they taxed in the year 2000, and this tells you what the total is that they taxed in 2010. I think that this study goes a long way and is a beginning process for people to understand what it is that happens when they open up the envelope marked tax bill enclosed. So I'm calling upon everyone who gets that envelope that says tax bill enclosed to do the following. Open it up and carefully read on the left-hand side of your tax bill who it is that's charging you. The county of Cook itself is approximately 10% of the tax bill. And for the last 17 years, there has been no increase at the county. It is these other agencies cumulatively that drive your bill up. I want to make one last comment. How is it that these taxes get raised? How is it that they get raised? And people are starting to catch on to the following. When you go and vote, when you go to vote, you can be in any suburb, and what you will see is that there are little bond issues on the ballot. So, since 2008, there have been 34 requests from different suburban municipalities to increase the taxes. People are starting to figure out that they should vote no. 15 have failed and 19 have passed. So if any of you are interested in which of these passed and failed, we have an additional handout for you. So this goes a long way. It's the first time. I want to thank Heartland, the Policy Institute, Warcraft, and BGA for participating in this today, but it goes really a very long way toward finally accumulating this data over a 10-year period, because on your bill, what you get is the previous year only. This is a 10-year matter, and it's going to be available for any of you who want to go to the Heartland website or the County Treasurer's website and review this information. Thank you.
All right, thank you, and thank you very much, Treasurer Pappas, for the data that allowed this report to take place, so that people have a better idea of what's going on in their taxing levies and the property taxes across Cook County. With that, we open it up to questions for anybody, any of the
anyone up there who can answer this. We supposedly have property tax caps in Illinois, limiting the annual increase to less than 5% of inflation. That doesn't add up to these kind of numbers. How were these agencies able to raise so much despite the caps?
I can answer that.
Can you stand in front of the microphone?
Yeah. They're able to rate, even though it's at 5% or cost of living, okay? What happens is, this chart, which I'm going to distribute to all of you, which at election time, they can come in and say, you know, would you be willing to pass on bond issuance so-and-so? If 51% of the people in a suburb agree that to a bond issue, whatever it is, it now exceeds the 5%. I think the key here is the following. Basically, the only way, or one of the only ways that the suburbs have, Greg, to increase taxes is through a bond issue. They have to go to the voters. The voters, when they get to the polls, don't necessarily understand what it is that they are voting on. I think a very controversial recent no was in Wilmette. I think that there was a lot of following of what happened in Wilmette. I'll be happy to give you this.
Can I say one other thing?
Go ahead, then I have a follow-up.
This just came to mind because it's so important. You know, the media does a great job of keeping an eye on Chicago and Cook County and the state of Illinois. But the suburbs are basically operating under the radar screen. There isn't enough media paying attention to all of these individual suburbs and taxing bodies, and that's why so many have been allowed and able to get away with this kind of increase. The vigilance needs to begin as intensively on the suburbs and the taxing units there as it has always been on the city and county and state. And take it from someone who's done a lot of that coverage over the years. The suburbs need to be watched. They are the ticking time bomb, and that's what this study points out. Not enough vigilant newspapers or television reporters watching all of these units of government. Now with this information, it's time to arm the citizens of the suburbs with information they haven't been getting. Too many residents of suburbs simply don't know what's going on in their branches of government. And so they go out in very small numbers. The turnout at election time is abysmally low, and they elect people who are more concerned with protecting their fiefdoms than protecting the wallets of the taxpayers. And this study should go a long way toward arming the regular citizens of the suburbs with the information they should always have had, so they can start making smart decisions about who to elect and how much tax money to pay.
And if I can follow up, since you're up there, nonetheless, these matters were put to the vote. They were debated in these municipalities, and the people said, I want to do this. Who are any of you to say, people, you're wrong, you can't do it?
No, nobody's wrong, Greg. We haven't had the 10-year look up to now. Now we're armed with a brand new set of statistics, and let's do two things. Were the increases justified? Has the money been spent efficiently and honestly and wisely? And most importantly, do we need all of these separate units of government? You know, Illinois has almost 8,000 units of government, almost twice as many units as any other state. And one of the biggest arguments, one of the biggest battles over the next decade has to be, do we need all of this government? Should we begin to eliminate and to consolidate? These are individual fiefdoms, individual taxing bodies, and they've been allowed to run wild over the years, and the result is what we're seeing today. And the other result is the bankruptcy in the state of Illinois.
I think there's another very significant point here, and it's the value of Heartland, BGA, and the Illinois Policy Institute being involved in this. When you open the newspaper in the morning, what you're reading about is the national debt of the United States, foreign governments, or state governments, All government is local, and this is the first time in the history of the country that someone is looking and magnifying what's occurring in the suburbs. And I think with these three great institutions involved, this is really a call to the country, to everyone in the country, because BGA will put this report out to every government in the country in their board of trustees, to also do this same sort of study in different parts of the nation. And I think that's the significance. I mean, we tend to look at cities, we tend to look at states, and we tend to look at national governments. We don't look at suburbs. So I think that Mr. Bast and company will be following up with what's occurring, Andy as well, around the United States at the local level.
Besides the pension obligations, which have been going up and frankly are things that probably the municipalities aren't going to be able to do much about, because debts have to be paid, are you seeing any other spending that is causing concern, or is most of this pension bill?
No. What you're seeing here is an outgrowth of a prior study that we did, the debt study that we did, showing the total debt of the city and the suburbs. In 3 to 4 weeks, the county board commissioned a second study. That study will be coming out, and what that will reveal is the cost of health to pensioners, which will up the debt number. It will also reveal what the rate of return is that each of these municipalities is expecting to get each year on their money, and cost of living increases. Those numbers are currently being crunched. I'm assuming at some time in the near future, we will all be meeting again to go over those numbers, and again, calling upon the debt study, what the total debt is of suburbs and the city of Chicago to be replicated nationally.
John, let me make a real quick comment. First, I want to thank the treasurer, because she's thanking us so graciously. She made all this information available to us. It's been a pleasure working with her office. We really appreciate that. And second, as the treasurer herself has reminded us, about 80% of the spending of government is on personnel. So indeed, this is a personnel-driven crisis. Pensions are a big part of that, so are health care costs, which have been increasing at about twice the rate of inflation. So it's no surprise that municipalities are increasing their spending this fast. Can they do something about it? Absolutely. I don't think personnel reform is off limits for municipalities or counties or states. And with their backs against the wall, you're going to see many more municipalities actually doing something aggressively to bring their personnel costs under control.
What kind of personnel reform are you talking about? Be specific in layman's terms. What's personnel?
I think well, a good example is what's going on in Wisconsin with Act 10, where they're asking public sector employees to contribute more toward their pensions, where they're limiting the amount of health benefits, especially for retired people. I think Ted is a true expert on this issue, so he can give more detail than that. But right there, and policies that avoid spiking, some of this is familiar territory to people who've talked about the state pension reform need, but there's a pretty simple series of recommendations that would improve pensions. I'll mention, I think Ted should come up here and say a quick word. I should mention we have a 50-state report card for pension reform on the table over here, which lists 7 or 8 reforms that are recommended for states to bring their pension costs under control. But Ted's a real expert.
Thank you. As you well mentioned, pension reform is one of the key things that we need in Illinois. Without pension reform, we'll never solve a lot of the issues we have across the state and local government. So, as Joe Will said, we've got to really look at pensions, reform them in a way that allows us to meet our obligations, not just in the retirees, but to education. A lot of the work we've done at the Illinois Policy Institute has shown how pensions are crowding out spending for education. Soon it'll crowd out spending for other things like Medicaid and healthcare. So we've got some tough battles, and what's important then is to bring down these costs. We have to allow schools to become more efficient. Of course, schools are 50 to 60% of any district's cost. So they need to look at how they reform themselves, and only when they're tasked with, hey, how do we deliver education more cheaply? How do we solve some of these cost issues both in healthcare and in pensions? Will we not get out of the mess we're in? So it's very important that we look at ideas like pension reform that have been expanding around the state, and how we control things like Medicaid costs so that there's enough money to go into our systems. But if we don't, we're going to crowd out spending for education and other core services.
Let me just add something to answer Bill's question. We have 4 mosquito abatement districts in Cook County, 4 separate mosquito abatement districts. If I'm a mosquito, I am flattered that people are paying so much attention to me. If I'm a taxpayer, I'm furious that we have this many separate units of government to handle a task like mosquitoes. We have 30 townships in Cook County, and questions have been raised about whether we still need townships because so much of the government has filled in with municipalities and the county's unincorporated services. So citizens of townships don't even have the power in our Constitution to get rid of those townships. So we need to give the citizens of townships and districts the power to say enough is enough. Let's start an abolition process. Let's start a consolidation process. And when we start doing that a little more, some of this is going to get wrung out of the system by virtue of eliminating units of government. There will be some pain because that will cost some jobs, but taxpayers ought to know that they're only paying for one level of services, not duplication and replication all across the board. And that's what we see too much of. We don't have 500 taxing bodies in one county unless there's an awful lot of bloat. We have dozens of single school districts. District superintendent, deputy superintendent, principal, assistant principal, clerks and secretaries, $1 million worth of administrative costs for one school. How many teachers would that buy? So this is the examination of government that needs to begin seriously by all of us, and it has to be in tandem with an education of taxpayers.
John, your report blames pension costs, rising pension costs and stuff like that, but is there any analysis of over those 10 years of an increase in pension costs alongside the...
There's been a lot of work, and I know the Illinois Policy Institute has looked at the pension issue. It's something we're looking into actually right now to try to figure out where that has gone. Because what we're seeing is that even over the course where the property taxes rose steady over the last 10 years, home prices went, just took a total arc. So why are property taxes still going up? The only reason for that is increased spending, because all these different taxing districts are saying, I need X amount of money, which is more than the year before. And it's just compounded over 10 years. So it's kind of obvious, just kind of looking at the numbers that's in the pensions primarily, and personnel costs, but we haven't done a full analysis of what that looks like, so maybe other organizations have that.
Do your figures include TIF districts?
No, I don't believe so.
SSAs?
Are you sure about that?
Pretty sure, yeah.
Because the figures you have in the report of the city of Chicago seem to be much higher than you would expect from not counting.
I can check on that.
I'll talk to you.
No problem.
Do they include the SSAs?
Yes, they have a special taxing districts.
Treasury Canvas, when you call for the consolidation of all these districts, can you try to pare down everything?
Look, before you call for anything, and I think this is an invaluable study for the press, because, I sit in the office and people are constantly calling me. I had a call from a reporter last week who said, I'd like to get information on these 6 suburbs. This is information that the press has never gotten. So you are now in a position, we have gathered the information, come up with a very preliminary analysis. We need your help here. And the way in which we need your help is, each of these 550 governments has a governing body. There are people in each of these 550 governments that make the decisions about whether or not the levy or the demand for money each year of these districts is going up. So I'm calling upon you to help us, to help people understand this question.
Did you take a position on the measure that was up for vote a couple of weeks ago to merge the recorder of deeds office and the county clerk's office, which would have saved $1 million a year under the Civic Federation?
I have not taken a position on that. I know that tomorrow there's a additional study on that. I have always welcomed consolidation. What I said was that if they were going to merge the recorder's office, what they need to do is merge all of tax collections. And I wrote a 2-page letter to the effect of that. I will be happy to give it to you, Greg. I will give you the letter as soon as the conference is over, calling for consolidation of all tax-related and payment functions.
John, you guys stopped at the border of Cook County, correct? When you're
Yes.
doing this? So when you've got something like School District 33, which is a sliver in Cook County and far wider in Kane and McHenry, you show an increase of nearly 700%, but over the same amount of time, if you took into all the entire area, it's still relatively high at 76%.
Right.
So why stop at Cook County and why not broaden that to? Is it unfair?
Well, we just, you know, people always talk about Cook County and they talk about Cook County government and they talk about the city of Chicago. They don't talk about all these other municipalities. What we tried to do was you got to limit somewhere, and we thought Cook County, as being the second largest county in the government in terms of people, that would be kind of a good border to start with. As you can tell, we tried to limit it to agencies with at least 15 taxable parcel districts. There were actually ones that are higher than this, but they may only have 1 or 2 or 10 parcels. So we tried to limit it to ones that had a reasonable presence. So like University Park, which only has 2 or 3 parcels, we didn't include, even though it's got about 3,000% increase over the 10 years.
Any other questions?
Do you want to consolidate these routes? So you want to have one mosquito abatement in the county?
Well, it makes logical sense, but that's going to have to come through Springfield and the voters. I mean, it doesn't make sense to have a separate elementary school district and a separate high school district. How to do it, I can't tell you. I wish I could say, okay, there are 550 governments that are actually a representation of 2,000 governments in Cook County. So what we've done here is consolidated the 2,000 into the 550 primary. You'd have to be foolish to say in this environment that you wouldn't want consolidation. How to do it is the problem. How do you get that done is the issue. So, I mean, it would require major legislative action in Springfield because these entities are set up by state constitution.
Place if they can't pay their bills, so we're going to ask them to settle this.
Well, here, we can't pay their bills, or we're
They
going to ask.
can't pay their bills. Springfield can't pay.
I think you have the first step to showing what's going on. This is the first time that you now have the figures that show what's going on. There are several different geographic areas represented here today. The next step is to review the numbers. We will also review the numbers and see what's happening. I think this is what's important in the suburban areas. There is no place to go to cover the cost of government in the suburbs other than this bill. The suburban governments in Cook County and the school districts do not have the legal authority to have a sales tax, to impose any type of user fees on electric bills, gas bills. So kind of what's the moral to the story here? If you look at all the charts that are enclosed, and you look, this was 3 different suburbs, but if you look at all the charts enclosed, the majority of the increase is in the suburbs. It's a much greater increase than the often studied city of Chicago. So I'm calling upon you to kind of look at that and go from there.
Question for the politicians. You guys last week in a different report out of the state recommended that amongst other things the state stop paying pensions for school districts and stop giving municipalities a share of the income tax, distributed share. If those were to go into effect, wouldn't it increase the pressure on these guys to raise these taxes?
Right, so we had a broader plan. We came out with our Budget Solutions 2013 last week, and in that we have a host of proposals to reform Illinois state budget. One of those, of course, is to repeal the 2011 income tax hike. So one of the goals is to return over $6 billion back to taxpayers, back to local communities. And within that plan, of course, if we do that, we have to find $6 billion in savings for different parts of the state. And the first one you mentioned was?
Pensions for teachers.
All right, so pensions for teachers. So today, the state pays for 75%, I should say the state pays for employees which are not employees of the state. 75% of the pensions the state is paying are for employees who are not part of the state. So what we have is we have a big disconnect between those groups who are incurring the cost and those groups who are paying for the cost. And any time you have a breakdown between somebody who spends the money and somebody who pays it, you're going to have all kinds of breakdowns in local accountability.
Sir, but given that these things are all working way above the rate of inflation, wouldn't taking away big chunks of money increase the pressure on the
Well, I think if we look at the overall state situation, right, over $8 billion in unpaid bills, chronic deficits, and the worst credit rating in the nation, what we all need to do, and I think we agree with, is we all need to tighten our belts. We all need to look and see how we reform our spending. And unfortunately, one of those things that has to happen for not just across groups of the state, but for school districts and local districts, is to find ways of making themselves more efficient. If you look at certain school districts, they are finding ways to cut costs. They're finding ways to become more efficient in how they deliver education, and that's something we urgently need across the state. You mentioned some good ideas of how to pass through those costs. Today, for example, and you may remember the story, school districts across the state are paying for teachers' pensions. Their share, the school districts are paying for the teacher share of their pensions. That can no longer go on. Over 2/3 of school districts pay for some or all of the teachers' portion of their payment. So there's a lot of reforms that can be had, and we don't think that we believe that school districts and local government districts can reform and can become more efficient if they're forced to do so. This is just one of those situations where in Illinois we must improve our situation.
All right, Glenn.
How many of the top 25 are on Maria's list of taxing bodies that increase their
All are.
bond? No, your bond list that you showed off that had like.
I'll give you the bond list.
How many are on there? Do you have any idea like how many
I don't
of these
know.
are responsible for taxpayer-approved bonds?
I can give you the list and you can run a comparison. Yeah.
Well, I guess I think that'll wrap it up. Joe, Andy, Ted, John, and the treasurer, I believe, will be available for additional follow-up questions. Again, a copy of the report is there on that table, along with more information about the Heartland Institute. Thank you very much for coming.